Welcome to our session, Dynamic Web Programming. I am Dr. Sumanta Kuila, Associate Professor, Colchester Technology. Today I am going to discuss a small demonstration on Dynamic Web Programming. Now, what is Dynamic Web Programming? Come to the slides. So, Dynamic Web Programming is nothing but a server-side programming. Once we will work with Sublet and JSP, and with the help of and in the side of server, I can say this is the server side programming, and virtually this is dynamic web programming, where our sublet, JSP, ASP, PHP, CGI all will works. In our here for dynamic web programming, we have to understand what is static page, what is dynamic page. Now, what is static page? Static page is the page which is still at the change of the time. The page and page content will be always fixed. This is the static page, where request file will be there and retrieve file will be received and the page will be saved. And what is dynamic page? The content of the page changes with the time bound from the request service of the HTML page and the response. So in the static page, the page is strict, and the dynamic page, the page content changes different time to time. This is the static page, where in the dynamic page, request service run with the CGI program and reads the result, and the result goes to the another header body of the HTML file. Now, for static and dynamic page, two important issues or important methods are get and post. Once we will work there, we will work on sublet, where the two important methods get and post, more explicitly do get and do post, as a virtual role. Now, if you work dynamic programming, first we have to learn the sublet. Now, here in the Web 2, we are working with the sublet architecture, which works in the three-tier architecture system. In the tier 1, it is client, works with the HTML browser and the Java client. Tier 2 is the sublets, which works with embodied business logic, secure, robust. Tier 3 is the data source, that is SQL, JDBC, ODBC files, etc. So these are the entire web architecture or web tier architecture regarding our dynamic web programming. Now come to the web application model. As I have discussed earlier, that is tiered architecture. There are three tier architecture: client tier, middle tier, and enterprise business tier. Client tier are the works with the application and where the browser is important. This is the GUI model, graphical user interface model. Middle tier works with the web container, sublet, and JSP are the main two web containers. Now, physical database is the SQL database, where file system works to the SQL. This is the entire three-tier architecture discussed here. Now, sublet name. Once it is works, we will work with the sublet name. Sublet name, once we will give, that is work with the HTTP sublet. Based on the HTTP sublet, we have to give the sublet name. Now, sublet invocation works with your sublet data source. It works with the service param, with the volume it typically attracts. Now, sublet APIs are the coding. API are the innovation coding, and where the source, from where the sublet access its source, that is the sublet, JavaX sublet, and it is once it is web, it is the JavaX sublet HTTP. So once the request and response issues come. This is the HTML request and HTML response. So it is controlled by the HTTP. So HTTP request and the HTTP response are the main issues on the Sublet API. Now if I go to the Sublet architecture overview, that is Sublet interface, which works with the generic Sublet. Generic Sublet works with HTTP Sublet when either do get, do post and service methods works. So overall the Sublet architecture works with a Sublet interface where the Sublet itself is there, the class where the generic Sublet is there, and the class which works with the HTTP Sublet, and the user Sublet is there. All are controlled by the do get, do post and the service methods. Sublet architecture where Sublet request, Sublet response, and we have to work with the HTTP Sublet request, HTTP Sublet response, which will work from the tier 1 to the tier 2 and vice versa. Sublet lifecycle overview. Sublet lifecycle works with init, service and destroy. There is a lifecycle. Init service works with the initial method. Service method will work with the circuit, and destroy works in the middle. Do get and do post works for their request and response, and after that it destroys. The method destroys. So I can say this is the entire service of the life cycle of the sublet. Now few important sublet class we have to work, that is generate sublet class and HTTP sublet class. So generic sublet class will implement the sublet, also implements serializable and sublet config. It also works with implements of all sublet methods, and the HTTP sublet extends to generic sublet. So HTTP sublet is the extension of the generic sublet, which extends a framework of the handling the HTTP protocol. It has its own subclass, sublet request, sublet response, and HTTP things. Now HTTP sublet methods are worked as with HTTP request head, that is get and head. Do post works for post, do put, do delete for the rare case, do trace, do option, which for the overriding. The service method dispatch request to appropriate to methods. So there are service methods which detects or which directs which sublet method will work for that. Which sublet method will work for that. Now generic sublet versus HTTP. If you work with the generic sublet versus HTTP sublet, there is a client method. Generic sublet works with your server in the client, and the HTTP sublet works with your browser. They are same as theoretically request and response will be there, and a sublet is there, server method will be there, and the HTTP server will be there, where HTTP sublet where do get and do post will work with the service method. Sublet request class. So for that we have to work with the sublet request class. Sublet communication, where the name of the parameters passed in the client, protocols used, and the name of the remote host. So sublet request class works with the remote host with the parameters it's passed. Subclass of the sublet request allows service to retrieve more protocols. So if there are more number of protocols and more protocols, sublet protocols are there, our sublet request class will be activated to do it. Now sublet response. Like the sublet requests, once the response method comes, the response comes with that content where sublet request works. Certain example is that print writer out, which is response.getWriter. The output will be displaced in the HTML file in the body, whatever the content we write in the body of the HTML file. Now sublet request output. The important methods are getWriter output, getWriter method, getOutput stream method. So these two important methods are used to display the output of the sublet. And many of other methods similar to the method sublet request refer to the documentation. So here the complete sublet page is displayed. Initially you check that imports files are there. Import Java.io, import sublet, JavaX sublet, import sublet HTTP. Sublets are not the parts of it, they are the part of J2E. So from that, the gateway components are reflected in the subnets. After that, the subnet normal extends HTTP subnet with the subnet class, public class, name of the class subnet is subnet welcome, which extends the HTTP subnets. Then public void do get subnet request, subnet response. It shows the exceptions, IO exception and subnet exception. Then request response dot set content type HTML and print write out get write. Then output HTML, output title, body, sublets, body it's XML, and initially after that it closes the connection. So in that example, it is a standard code of a sublet is displayed here. How we can write a sublet and the outcome will be displayed through the JSP with the response dot print writer out. Print writer out equal to response dot get writer. Sublet lifecycle init is the one component of sublet lifecycle. Init details it will work. Then another important content is the JSP, Java server pages. Once sublet works, JSP is the de facto component. It comes with the sublet. Sublet comes. The Java server page is the display component of your sublet. It is hybrid with your HTML and the core Java code. JSP allows to maximize standard static HTML pages, dynamic generated HTML pages. Sublet JSP, this is in that page, the standard sublet JSP page is displayed. The HTML files are there. Java util date, it will be displayed the date of the HTML file. Now this sublet once Java server page executes, it's a basic building block of the Java server pages. Java server to special JSP container, first of the JSP code, first invocation delay, then JSP error. So we need standard JSP page, JSP errors, JSP code, JSP invocation with the hybrid of your HTML and the core Java. Translation error, etc. It will be considered to write the JSP files. This is the JSP example, you know, that is we will write the Java code in the HTML file, and these are the signs where we have to write the Java code. In between the HTML file is a embedded file structure. JSP format sublet. JSP look like standard HTML. And normal input HTML markup tags, HTML codes written easily, and sublets are basically server-side coding which works with print writer or output stream used to small amount of context to fix technical pattern. Now for sublet and JSP, this is very important is Tomcat. Tomcat is a web container. What is a web container? We need a web server, and web server works with the help of the web container. Tomcat is a web container to work with the sublet engine, which activates the sublet engine and handles the sublet request for Apache application server. Base thing, Tomcat is a sublet container. As sublet container, Tomcat handles web pages, sublets, and JSPs. So it is the web container. Apache is the web server, and that web container handles web pages, sublets, and JSP. Apache can handle many types of web services. Apache can handle without Tomcat. Apache can handle without Apache. Tomcat can handle without Apache. It is easier to install Tomcat standalone than a part of Apache. Apache Tomcat of the free source. So I use client and server side. So this is the once our application is ready, I have to work with client side. Then if I want to the production, I have to go to the server side with the help of the AntiX. Now this is a general discussion of a dynamic web page where we discuss the static web page, which is the page is static, the dynamic web page where the page changes time to time, the sublet its activity, and the JSP its activity. And in the end, we have worked with the dynamic page. Tomcat is the web container where Apache is the web server which serves to work with the JSP as well as So thank you for my small discussion. Ask me any question.